Gentlemen, may I ask you, each of you listened to the first session. Does the government's current approach strike the right balance between the emerging technologies that we know are becoming available and retaining flexibility in order to give us a long-term supply? So, Mr. Ambler, if you could give us your thoughts on that topic, please.
It's quite simple, no.
Okay, and perhaps elaborate.
Right.
Would you elaborate?
I've got my aid memoir notes for myself here, but I thought, and I wasn't aware of the time problem, it might be helpful for anybody who wants to see what I would have said if I'd been allowed to say it.
Can you summarise, sir, your views?
Yes, would you like a copy of
well, absolutely, yes, if you share that with the committee, but just give us a quick summary of where you see this.
Right. The Department of Energy Security and Net Zero has 4,217 civil servants who should be capable of simple arithmetic, but appear not to be. What we've done in our team of 5 people, rather less than 4,217, our 5 people have done what the government should have done, is to publish a plan of what the energy market would look like in the year 2050, and that's what we understood this inquiry to be about. And basically, wind and other renewables have to take the prize as the most important source, and much of that is new, although not that new. And so our analysis started with saying, how much can the renewables supply? And the answer is somewhere between 40 and 50%. It's nothing like as much as some people would have us believe.
So your case is that the government's overstating the amount of our energy sources.
The government's not stating anything because they haven't done a plan.
All right, okay. If I may turn to Professor Gross, please.
So I think that the government is beginning to get some things right. So I think it's laudable. There's been a really clear pivot towards the recognition that the system infrastructure in particular needs to be planned. So the Strategic Spatial Energy Plan is a welcome development. We're clearly no longer in a kind of world where we can be technology neutral and the government can leave everything to the market. That ship's completely sailed. We're in a transition phase where we're trying to build out renewables. But you've already heard about some of the things that are being done less well. In particular, the government's falling behind on heat system decarbonisation. And to jump to the good bit, we can't take gas off the bars until we have enough flexibility provision from other sources. That certainly is unlikely to happen for 2030, even by 2035. And so therefore we need to be thinking about the extent to which gas is a strategic reserve and needs to be kept operable until no longer needed. I'll pause in
Mr.
Parr. Colleagues.
So the question on balance. There are certainly some things that are going well, but there are a few things that aren't going so well. So there needs to be a considerable emphasis on the delivery of offshore wind, onshore wind and solar, and with the associated grid infrastructure that is needed to transmit it from the places where it is generated to where it is needed. That's a delivery thing where the government needs to be de-risking the investment as far as possible. There's an innovation space, and the two I would point to are around storage, particularly long-term storage, and in demand-side response, where they need to be looking to free up and reduce regulation to allow to give opportunities for technologies to come through, and in certain cases driving innovation through funding. And there's a third area where there is clearly overemphasis compared to what is required. We believe we should be aiming for a 100% renewables system, and I can't for the life of me see why the government is so enthusiastic about nuclear, given the product is so rubbish, long term and over expensive, and also carbon capture and storage. We will certainly need some carbon capture and storage, but as you will tell by a brief glance at me, I'm not in the first flush of youth. I was talking about carbon capture and storage in the late 90s. We are now probably closer to net zero time in 2050 than when we were first having conversations about its significance. It has delivered globally very little. And I think to put an overemphasis on that as a key part of the overall answer seems to me extremely optimistic.
Okay, we're emerging differing views already. So, and Professor Watson.
Yeah, I mean, I just add to what certainly Doug and Rob have said. Broadly, some things are going in the right direction. We are making a lot of progress. I think looking at governments, for example, their energy security policy statements over the last couple of years, I think if anything, they're focusing on the supply side on too many long-term options and not enough on the short-term options. So I'd like to see them doubling down on the wind, the offshore wind and the solar, of course with the battery storage and all the flexibility you need to go with it, as you discussed with the previous panel. I think there's a temptation to sort of fund, nuclear, hydrogen, things that are going to deliver in the 2030s onwards, but we really need to accelerate the stuff that's going to keep delivering now. And then the other thing I'd add is the demand side. I think government is not doing anywhere near enough on the energy efficiency agenda. I know that's not necessarily in the scope of this inquiry, but I really think you have to, if you're going to have a strategy for the future of electricity or energy as a whole, energy demand has to be at the centre of it, and it has to be the first thing you address.
A holistic approach. Lloyd Russell-Moore.
How would the government improve how it coordinates policy on decarbonising energy for electricity, heat and transport? So that's effectively following on from the question that you had, what does the government need to do?
I think you talked again to the last panel about this. One thing I'd say, there's lots of things the government needs to do, but the thing I'd really emphasise is making that decision on heat, allied to upgrading our housing stock. So it's upgrading the housing stock, which of course is happening, especially for some low-income homes under current schemes, but the scale is not enough. The government has really missed an opportunity with the energy crisis of the last couple of years to scale that up, and then link that to a decision on heat. I think.
What savings does that actually achieve for us in terms of demand?
In terms of overall demand, the Energy Demand Consortium, a research consortium in the UK, has done scenarios of up to 50% reduction in demand, which is quite eye-watering over the period to 2050. I'm personally a little sceptical you can get that far, but certainly, within the 25% region. So they've done a lot of analysis looking across the economy of the kind of reduction that could be delivered.
And I know that's not this inquiry, but we have another inquiry on the same topic, so it's useful to get the wider bits of discussion. For the ordinary person, what does that actually entail, them having to do at the moment, and what should they have to do in the future?
Personally, I wouldn't put it quite like that in terms of an ordinary person having to do something.
At the moment, an ordinary person has to try and find a supplier, try and find a bid stream that they might or might not get. Yeah. They'll probably not find a supplier that matches up with government money, and they'll probably give up. Yep. Or if they're wealthy enough, they'll pay for it out of their own money. Exactly. And most people will do nothing. So that's what the ordinary person does at the moment, and we have no progress. So why I meant it from the ordinary person, I meant is, what are the barriers to achieving
it's information, it's access to the right skilled people. Clearly, for most people, it's access to money, to upgrade your home and invest in a new heating system. And, that was the point I was going to make. The government ought to say electric heating is the lead option now. We're not going to keep pretending it's a choice on a national level between that and hydrogen, because all the evidence is electricity is probably the front runner. But there are examples from France to Ireland to other countries where you've got really good, actively well-funded agencies that can help people through that journey, identifying suppliers, even project managing upgrades of their home, and doing all the things they need. Because at the moment, it's a very, very difficult thing to navigate for most households.
Doug and Robert, we'll go back very quickly.
I concur with that. Our model of how we go about reducing gas use in the majority of homes is to hope that every homeowner is going to make themselves an expert in the energy system and on energy technologies. Now, we have proposed a warm homes agency which does a number of things, but it includes independent advice and support and redress where necessary, where poor workmanship has been delivered, so that there is something that looks like a decent consumer journey. That agency could also be staffed by people who really know the industry and know what's going on, and help with the skills build out that is going to be necessary to make sure that there is enough in the supply chain of people who are able to do the job and as I say, deal with poor workmanship, or give confidence to people that there is going to be poor workmanship. We see where there is a kind of more structured approach to being able to deliver efficiency and changes in heating system, as there are through local authorities and large social housing providers, then they can take those decisions and deliver it. But individual homeowners, it's much more challenging.
Mm-hmm. Robert, I mean, there's this area. Do we need a similar kind of approach in all areas where you have agencies that are specialised, focusing on the rollout? If we're looking at transport, if we're looking at home ownership, or how does the government deliver that change?
I do think there's a particular case for this kind of agency or information providing central body for home energy efficiency because of the multiple market barriers and obstacles and information gaps. I don't think it's the same, actually, no, at all.
So what government intervention do we need in other areas of the market to make it work?
If you're talking about, so what we're talking about is electrifying the 2/3 of final energy use that we currently get from burning stuff. So that's burning gas in our houses, that's burning petroleum products in our cars. I don't think it's feasible to be able to electrify those 2/3 of energy services if electricity itself isn't sufficiently affordable. So you've touched upon some of the issues around what percentage VAT you might pay for electric vehicle charging. If you stop at a motorway service station and you don't have a Tesla, you can pay anything in a range of about 50 to nearly 90p per kilowatt hour for a fast charger. That's far too expensive. That makes running an electric car as expensive or more expensive than running a car on premium petrol. And so I think there needs to be, we have a huge strategic opportunity to deliver affordable electricity using our resources in the North Sea in particular, and by ensuring that we get this build out of low carbon generation delivered at the lowest possible cost and at the lowest possible cost of money, so the lowest possible rate of interest. And I think that has to be the major strategic objective for the government if we're going to do this decarbonisation and electrification journey. So that is a fundamental prerequisite and it's overlooked very, very much.
The focus needs to be bringing the price down. And Tim, anything very briefly?
Right. Your committee launched an inquiry yesterday on this very subject, to which we will be responding. But in a nutshell, for now, the answer is privatisation. The energy market has never been privatised yet, although there's been much talk of it, and electricity not in particular. And we will be putting forward answers to your questions as part of that inquiry.
That seems to be completely opposite of where we are going, the future service operator coming back in-house.
Isn't that? Yes, and it is.
Privatisation.
Unsurprisingly,
I will interestingly read the paper when you send it.
Unsurprisingly, this government is entirely wrong, as it is on quite a lot of things. And why I recommend that you read my notes, which you won't get a chance to hear. But in a nutshell, Greenpeace is completely wrong that nuclear is some sort of fad. It is an essential part. There are three parts. In 2050, there are three sources of energy or electricity. The main one, we agree, is renewables, between 40 and 50%. Because, amazing as Greenpeace will discover, the wind does not always blow, nor does the sun always shine. And therefore you need high nuclear to about 30%, and you need fossil fuels with carbon capture and storage. And the government is exceedingly slow on both of those things. Now, given the fact that both of those things are absolutely crucial to having net zero 2050, it is astonishing that they would spend their time fussing about other odds and ends, and I accept that the price of charging your car on the forecourt is important. But compared to those strategic issues, they're not important. And those are the three things that really matter.
Okay, thank you. Let's go on to Vicky Ford.
So in this journey towards getting less from burning, more from wind blowing, nuclear, etc., what new energy security vulnerabilities will we have? And what does the government need to be doing now to address those, Robert?
So the new vulnerabilities will be around the kind of variability of renewables. We will continue to be exposed to gas price volatility, so we shouldn't separate physical security from economic security, in my view, for as long as we need to burn gas in order to keep our system reliable. And you've heard from previous colleagues that that's likely to be the case for some years to come. The fundamental requirement is that we need new network infrastructure so that we can connect to places where the renewable resource is strongest and where we have the opportunity to do renewables at scale. And that's the thing that we've been falling behind on. So to the extent to which there might be future vulnerabilities, those vulnerabilities will be associated with our inability to deliver the network assets that we need quickly enough.
Always trying to move the power from the power source towards the demand, especially when it comes to renewables. Is the government doing enough to try and encourage the demand to move closer to the supply?
Well, I don't actually think that it's feasible for that to happen because it's windy in the North Sea. There aren't many people that are living there. It's easier to build wind farms.
Necessarily people, but
so no, I don't think it's possible. I think we need to strategically develop the network. In the same way that we built a network for coal by wire in the 1960s, we need to build a network for wind by wire now.
Jim or Doug?
I just wanted to come in on your security question.
Yeah.
I think Rob has identified some of the risks. There's also a risk with making sure the gas system continues to be secure as we use less and less of it. If people are moving off gas to electric heating, you're using less gas, as Keith was explaining in the first session, for electricity. You're going to still have to have a reliable gas network, and you're going to have to pay for that with fewer customers. And I don't think government's got a strategy yet for how it's going to manage that. How is it going to pay for a network which is in declining use? So that's the second thing I'd add. Third is cyber security and digitalisation. I mean, it's not something people put on record very much for very obvious reasons, but I think as we electrify more and more things and things are connected, cyber security becomes more and more important. Yep. And then the final one is the minerals and critical minerals. I mean, it's not the same as oil and gas security because the minerals get embodied in the technology. It's not something we need as a fuel on an ongoing basis, but we still need to think about the security and how that gets embodied in the products.
So reminding the government they need to be mindful of all of those other risks
Absolutely
is something
right.
that we could definitely mention in our report. Doug?
So, I'd try and add to what's already been said. Firstly, recognising that demand is an important part of security as well. Far too much focus is on security through supply and not enough through demand, and that applies to critical minerals as well. We need some infrastructure to start recycling the minerals that we've imported into the UK. Now, on other aspects of sort of reliable electricity supply, these are to some extent matters of choice. We have, for the last couple of winters and many previous, when the price has been extremely high, our economic security of the gas system has relied on the storage of gas going on in continental Europe, because we have very little storage here. And so, and we do import quite a bit of electricity almost on a daily basis at the moment, and we're not too exercised about that. I would recommend, however, that the UK does invest in long-term storage for when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, as we've been perfectly well aware of for a very long time, as a challenge in the 100% renewable system, and that we can contribute to the global technology push around things like green hydrogen, the flow of that green hydrogen into other sectors, but also like fertilizer, etc., but also into the long-term storage of electricity that we're going to need.
So, clearly, over the past 2 years since Ukraine, we've really understood how insecure our energy supply is, what's happened with energy prices. Do you think that in a net zero world, our power supply, our energy supply, our electricity supply will feel more secure?
Well, it could do. I mean, it depends on the sort of actions that we've been talking about. How fast do we build out the North Sea? Yeah. How fast do we do grid?
It is an exceptionally good question. The storage of electricity has, in one form or other, batteries or hydrogen or whatever it might be, has been, it's important, but it's been greatly overhyped. And to say that we can rely on the continent, we imported 12% of our energy needs from the continent, if you want a number. The government is my central point. The government is not sufficiently preoccupied with the numbers. They have not done the arithmetic, they have not published the arithmetic, and we need to see the arithmetic, which, if they have, should not be kept secret. Because a lot of the debate we're having this morning depends on the numbers, and if we don't know what the numbers are, it's all fairly meaningless. So we need...
I can see that you're a mathematician, as am I, so let's leave it there and pass on to the next person.
The answer to your question is yes, it will be more secure.
You feel more secure.
More stable prices. There'll be a transition. We shouldn't make the kind of presumption that we can get the new, for example, hydrogen in seasonal storage available. If it's not delivered on time, we have an energy security risk. We need to rely on gas, keep the gas system available until we don't need it anymore. But when we reach that destination point, we can absolutely have a more secure and more stable priced energy system.
I can do 2 more minutes.
All right.
3 more minutes.
Well, what I'd like to do then, if I may, is just invite each of you, because we are going to need to conclude in 2 or 3 minutes, just to, are there any issues that you believe we should hear about that you haven't yet told us in your evidence? So, Mr. Ambler, yes, please.
I think regulation is a very important point, be it in the pricing, which we'll come on to in your new inquiry starting now, but also the slowness of nuclear provision is due more than anything else to unnecessary regulation.
Hey, Professor Gross.
I think there's a place for nuclear. I don't think we can expect to get more than 1 or 2 reactors per decade. I think we need to be realistic about that. For me, it's all about timelines and sequencing, and ensuring that we look after the legacy assets infrastructure that we've got for as long as we need it, whilst building the new infrastructure for the net zero future.
Dr. Parr.
As it was touched on in the last question session, I'd like to make a point about biomass.
Yes.
And I do not think that the current model of mass burn of wood can ever be sustainable. The model of trying to get something and turn something into a commodity, ship it from various places in the world, and have some kind of business-led certification. That was the point Vicky Ford was
making earlier.
Yeah. We've tried it. We've tried it with soya. It failed. We've tried it with palm oil. It failed. We've tried it with fish.
We've got the point. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Professor Watson.
A couple of quick points. One on nuclear. I think the model we're pursuing with Hinkley C and Sizewell C is not really going to deliver very quickly. Clearly, it's deliver very expensive. So I don't mind if the government wants to try the alternative, the small modular reactor approach, but I think we have to be very careful not to believe the estimates how much they're going to cost until we built 1 or 2 or 3. And then on biomass, I agree we need proper sustainability standards, but if we're going to continue to have things like
I'm just going to do a really quick last question, because we've got 2 professors,
okay,
a doctor and a mathematician. You must look at international comparisons.
Yes.
In terms of how's the UK performing versus other countries, would you say we're in the top quartile, bottom quartile, or somewhere in the middle, Jim?
Depends what sector you're talking about.
Oh, just come on. Is the UK on the whole?
I think we're in the middle on average.
In the middle.
CO2 good, spend for the transition poor.
We're definitely in the top quartile for renewables, and we were the leading offshore wind country for a number of years.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was also agreeing with Greenpeace, amazingly, about biomass. The nuclear future is these SMRs, which were spoken of. Our calculations are that we're going to need 70 SMRs by 2050, which is doable. We explain how, and the government is tentatively ordering one, not 70, one, in 4 years' time. It's pathetic.
Thank you all for your evidence today. I'm afraid I have to say the following. As we're about to become inquirate, I'm going to have to end our formal proceedings.